John, personal issues in the past have clouded everybody's decision-making on the way up to this role. But the board sees now that I have put my personal problems behind me. And they've seemed clear to let me know when I want to come back and run Raw, I can do it whenever I feel like it. So, Johnny, at this time, it truly warms my heart to let you know that I wish you well in all. If you smell what The Rock is cooking.
WBCB presents Pro Wrestling Weekly.
Tell me he didn't just say that.
Call in with a question or comment at 215-949-3232 or 888-922-2149.
The Tower of Power, too sweet to be sour, funky like a monkey, holy yeah.
And now, here's your host of Pro Wrestling Weekly, Ferran Derry.
It doesn't matter what your name is.
Really? Yeah!
Hello and welcome to a post-Royal Rumble edition of Pro Wrestling Weekly here on 1490 WBCB and online at WBCB1490.com. Ferran Derry here with you to talk a whole bunch of stuff. We've got a great slate of things set up this hour. Of course, the aftermath of the WWE Royal Rumble from this past Sunday, which, I'll be honest, I was underwhelmed. I was rather underwhelmed. For those who missed it, I actually got two of my four picks right. Daniel Bryan and CM Punk respectively retaining their respective championships. Daniel Bryan beating the Big Show and Mark Henry by escaping the cage in a fairly short match, but a lot of us knew that Mark Henry was injured going into it, so that's why he didn't exactly contribute a lot to it. And CM Punk beating Dolph Ziggler, not any kind of chicanery by John Laurinaitis as the guest referee, which was more of a guest enforcer since he was outside the ring for the majority of it. But CM Punk retaining as well. And, of course, John Cena and Kane, they fought to a double countout. That feud's going to continue at the next pay-per-view, which we're only a couple of weeks away from, Elimination Chamber. More about that in a minute. And your winner of the 2012 Royal Rumble, that's right, the Great White, Sheamus, entering in at number 22 in what was a very comedy-filled Rumble. And I don't know about you out there. I think that it kind of shows where the roster's at this point. Is there were a lot of comedic wrestlers, a good chunk of nostalgia, and part of that comedy had all three commentators as entrants in the Rumble. Yes, 62-year-old Jerry Lawler, Booker T, and Michael Cole, with that awful Texas Longhorns orange singlet of his. Yes, all three of them were entrants in the Rumble. That was one of three notable comedic spots that occurred during the Rumble. Of course, you had the face-off of the Cobra versus Mr. Sacco, Santino Marella and Mick Foley, and kind of a bit of a standoff. And before that, what I thought was the actually most entertaining comedy bit of the night went to Ricardo Rodriguez, who did the whole Alberto Del Rio entrance, making a lot of people, myself included, initially think that Del Rio was making his return after an injury. But no, instead of a Lamborghini or a Porsche or some other fancy car, in comes Ricardo Rodriguez with his 1985 Datsun. Oh, man. And he comes out, does the whole Alberto Del Rio entrance. And I don't know about anybody else, but at that point, there was a small part of me that was hoping that Ricardo Rodriguez would have won the Rumble, following in Alberto Del Rio's footsteps from a year ago. But it was not the case. Sheamus is moving on. He has not yet announced who he's going to challenge at WrestleMania for their respective title. That announcement will come after the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, which so far we have 3 matches set up. John Cena and Kane in a rematch. This time, no disqualification and no countouts. and, of course, the 2 Elimination Chamber matches for the World and WWE Championships. First, looking at the WWE title, you've got CM Punk defending against Dolph Ziggler, Chris Jericho, The Miz, R-Truth, and Kofi Kingston. There's your 6 for the Raw section of the Elimination Chamber match. And then for SmackDown, the World title, you've got Daniel Bryan and, of course, Cody Rhodes, Randy Orton, The Big Show, Wade Barrett, and The Great Khali. So there is your 6 for the SmackDown portion of the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view. Also, this hour we're going to talk, well, of course, with this being Super Bowl weekend, I thought we'd take a little bit of a look back and kind of get your thoughts, some favorite football wrestling crossover moments, and there are certainly a few of them. Obviously, a slew of wrestlers who at one point in their lives played pro football, and with the shoe being on the other foot, you've had pro football players who had their hand at wrestling. Not as many necessarily, but still some notable ones there. And one of them is actually celebrating a birthday today. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. We'll get into that now. Of course, that infamous New York Giant. Now that the Giants are in the Super Bowl again this year. Lawrence Taylor, of course, wrestling against Bam Bam Bigelow at WrestleMania 11 back in 1995, accompanied by his all-pro team, Ken Norton Jr., Chris Spielman, Ricky Jackson, Carl Banks, Steve McMichael, who went on to wrestle for a few years in WCW and had a cup of coffee with the Four Horsemen. And, of course, the late Reggie White. A lot of the Philadelphia fans very familiar with the Minister of Defense, Reggie White. All that, of course, coming from WrestleMania 11. One notable wrestling football crossover comparison. We've got a few more of those that will roll out over the course of the hour as well. Also, we'll talk a little bit of TNA this hour. Coming up in the second segment, I've got a clip from this past Thursday and Impact, which was over in London. We'll talk a little bit about that. The main event's been set for Against All Odds. We'll get that going. Of course, that pay-per-view is 1 week from tomorrow. Also, some other interesting news and notes, some various appearances that we had at the Rumble, including someone who we haven't seen in quite a while, and yet the 3rd female to involve herself in a Rumble in Karma. That's right, Kia Stevens, formerly Awesome Kong over in TNA. She entered the Rumble, and more interesting than just being in the Rumble, especially considering her size, but she did so about a month after giving birth. That's right, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy named Jamie back on New Year's Eve, according to TMZ, and she and her fiance, they've set a date in June for their wedding, but the child is healthy, and now it's just a matter of getting back into wrestling shape for Karma to reign upon the divas and possibly a few men in the WWE. Also, as you heard in the opening clip, I know I'm about 10 minutes removed from it, but we're getting back to it now. The return of The Undertaker. For the first time since WrestleMania 27, we're going back about 10 and a half months. That's right. The Undertaker making his appearance, interrupting the about-to-be wishing of future endeavors by Triple H onto John Laurinaitis. And The Undertaker came out, did the old throat slash gesture, essentially repeating last year, silently challenging Triple H to a match at WrestleMania since being taken to the limit at WrestleMania 27. And Triple H just shaking his head, patting Undertaker on the back and leaving the ring. So it looks like The Undertaker issuing the challenge this time as opposed to others challenging him for Taker's undefeated WrestleMania streak to continue and go to possibly 20-0 on April Fool's Day of this year. Should be interesting to say the least. We'll go ahead and get to your phone calls coming up on the other side. We'll take care of business in a little bit. Also got some other tidbits and news and information, things of that sort. John Cena and The Rock going at it on Twitter. Of course, the big topic with The Undertaker, his hair. It's amazing how hair ends up being a topic, but the a lot of people were wondering, was he wearing a wig? Because the hair, it looked rather unnatural, to say the least. And some people thought, well, maybe it's a series of extensions. Possibly it was a wig. I mean, there was a photo released, I believe, this past summer or maybe even the fall of The Undertaker on some sort of a snorkeling or scuba type adventure, and he had hair that barely made it past the ears. That's how short it was. So has he been growing it out since then, working on making his return, and didn't quite have the hair grown out as long as WWE officials would have hoped as we head into the WrestleMania season? It's a possibility, but it's amazing how The Undertaker's hair has been such a strong topic of conversation. In fact, it definitely did so quite often in the Facebook, on our Facebook fan page, WBCB Pro Wrestling Weekly. Lots of activity over the course of the week. You can certainly chime in on the conversation. Just go on to Facebook, type in WBCB Pro Wrestling Weekly. Go ahead and like the group, and you're in. It's an open group, no restrictions, nothing like that. Just make sure you behave yourself on there, and I'll get into that feedback coming up in a little bit, because there is certainly a great deal of it. Special thanks to Ross for chiming in a great deal, as well as Ryan over the course of the last week. Definitely getting a lot of conversation going on that, and I'll have that coming up on the other side, along with your phone calls. Another bit of news, in addition to the inductees previously announced, the Four Horsemen, Edge, and Mil Mascaras, Mike Tyson is going to be the celebrity inductee in this year's WWE Hall of Fame. Does that add, take away, or not even matter as far as the credibility of the Hall of Fame? Has it pretty much been shot with the likes of Drew Carey or Coco Beware? You know, where do you think the level of prestige is as far as the Hall of Fame? We'll be kicking this around all the way up to the Hall of Fame induction ceremony March 31st. I mean, you know that's going to be happening for sure. Also, we're looking for some of your favorite wrestling, football crossover comparisons in honor of the Super Bowl that's going to be tomorrow. I'm not going to give you a pick because, as an Eagles fan, I really have no vested interest, and I don't have any shekels on the game either. So really no reason for me to go either way on it. You know, I just want a good, entertaining game, no blowouts. So good luck to the Patriots. Good luck to the Giants. May the best team win, and hopefully the Eagles will do a little bit better in the 2012 season. Anyway, coming back, we'll take a listen at that little soundbite from TNA, as well as getting your calls, Facebook feedback. We still got today in wrestling history, news and notes, a ton still to do here on Pro Wrestling Weekly. This is Pro Wrestling Weekly on 1490 WBCB and online at WBCB1490.com.